Heart to Heart, a short Dvar Torah for Parashat Va'etchanan. In the introduction to his book, Duty of the Hearts, Rabbeinu Bahya ibn Paquda expresses surprise that serious individuals don't invest enough time in knowing the duties of the heart, which are the conscious and the hidden wisdom, meaning the commandments that require thoughts and feelings rather than physical actions. Why am I discussing a book of ethics in the context of a weekly Dvar Torah? Because of the 13 commandments that Rabbeinu Bahya mentioned as proof of duties of the heart that they actually exist, 9 come from Sefer Devarim and only 4 from the rest of the Torah. Truth is, to see the difference between the Mitzvot and Dvarim and the rest of the Torah, one doesn't have to learn the duties of the heart. Anyone learning Sefer HaChinuch will notice that most of the commandments he learns from Bereshit till Bemidbar refer to things that should and should not do, and commandments like carrying the ark on the shoulder, shaving the Nazirite, descending the impure of that of the cow, and not worshipping idols, all those day-to-day things. In our Parashah, on the other hand, we begin to see more complex commandments like the unity of God, loving and fearing God, and so on. In other words, Dvarim introduces commandments of what to think and feel and not think and feel. To illustrate this point, I want to examine a commandment from our Parashah. As we know, Parashat Va'etchanan repeats the 10 commandments, 10 of the most famous commandments in the Torah. Before the average commandment counter, who doesn't want to count a commandment twice, there were apparently 2 options. To count all 10 commandments as commandments the first time they appeared in Parashat Torah, or alternatively, to count them all the second time in our portion, right? The truth is that this claim would be challenging to check. Most commandment counters didn't divide their count based on Parashiot. On the other hand, Sefer HaChinuch, whose count is based on the order of the Parashiot, didn't choose either of these options. I mean, he chose the first option, but only almost. All 10 commandments are counted as commandments in Parashat Torah, except for one that's counted twice, once in Parashat Torah and once in Parashat Va'etchanan. Which commandment has the honor of being counted twice and why? The last of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet, undergoes a metamorphosis to thou shalt not desire. What's the difference between them? I'm glad you asked. According to Maimonides, followed by the author of Sefer HaChinuch, thou shalt not covet in Parashat Torah is a practical commandment. There is a prohibition to raise in our thoughts, to devise a plan, to take for ourselves what belongs to our brother. This prohibition, however, is not completed until an action is taken. In other words, there is a prohibition to cause someone else to depart from his belongings that starts from the moment one begins planning. Or maybe there's a prohibition to plan that doesn't come into effect until executed. In any case, it's an intellectual commandment with a practical implication. In contrast, the commandment, thou shalt not desire, despite the reason for the commandment being because the fixation of thought and desire for that thing will be a reason to devise a plan to take it from him, meaning it's the beginning of a slippery slope, is ultimately prohibited even if it remains in thought. In other words, it's a prohibition on wanting something. Is one example enough to point to a phenomenon? Not really. Therefore, we need to mention commandments like the unity of God, love of God, prayer, Birkat HaMazon, etc., which, although devoid of the dilemma of thou shalt not covet, are clearly duties of the heart and are learned only from Dvarim and not from the books that preceded it. The question remaining is, how is this book different from all other books? Although I could pursue several possible lines of thought, I want to suggest only one. Maimonides asks a question in his epistle on resurrection. If resurrection is such a major principle of faith, why doesn't it appear explicitly in the Torah? Maimonides' answer is that the Torah refers specifically to regular things that happen naturally, but the reason for this is interesting. Why does the Torah emphasize only natural things over and over? Because humanity couldn't comprehend things beyond the familiar natural world, and even that was a bit beyond them. When Moshe spoke to the average Israelite, concepts like reward and punishment were beyond his comprehension. You want to talk about resurrection? This can also explain Moshe's decision to postpone the discussion of other complex commandments, such as love of God, belief in God's unity, or thou shalt not desire. It's better to start with practical commandments such as let no man go out of his place, or let him and his neighbor nearest to his house take, meaning something practical. In Devarim, however, after 40 years in the desert, it's a different story. The nation entering its land is now ready for the next stage. in memory of my beloved student Amichai Shimon ben Yishayan bat Yerubin Hashem Yikom Damo, Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.